Hey there, Misfits. This is Kate.
And this is Kevin.
Welcome to Horrorwood. Have a touch of business to attend to before we get started in this story. First, we have a new Patronian.
Yoli
Mira, thank you so much. Our newest Misfit Murderino.
Thank you.
We appreciate your support. And we are happy that you're here. And we also have the announcement of the goat's name.
The goat.
Kevin, would you like to do the honors?
I will. Do you want me to repeat them?
Sure.
Okay. We had 3 choices that we gave the people on Patreon. Or no, it was public.
It was public. The Patronians recommended
it. Right. So the 3 names were Idris Elba, Starina the Screamer, and Betty. And the winner is Betty!
And that was a suggestion by Becca Durrett. So thank you, Becca. And now it's Kevin, Kate, and Betty here at Horrorwood.
Could you imagine if at the beginning of our podcast was, "Hi, Misfits, this is Kate, and this is Kevin, and this is..."
I'm pretty sure after a while people would be like, okay, enough. Skip.
And this is Betty.
So there you have it. Those are all our announcements. We also posted the winning name on Instagram.
It's like an award show. Go watch it.
So you might have already seen it by the time this episode comes out. So now, without further ado, I want to get into this case. I'm excited to talk about Ron Goldman because honestly, I just don't ever hear a lot about him.
Sure.
I hear a lot about Nicole Brown Simpson and all of that, but never much about Ron Goldman. And there's a new documentary or like 2-part documentary coming out, I think this upcoming weekend, called The Life and Murder of Nicole Brown Simpson. And I was like, and Ron Goldman? But no. So
I am such a dipshit that when you said Ron Goldman, I forgot that he was also murdered in this situation.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
This murder happened when I was like a kid.
You had been pretty young.
I was young.
Yeah.
And so like I knew it was happening, but I haven't gotten into like actually exploring it until like recently.
Yes.
Because there's so much right now coming out.
Without further ado, I want to talk about Ron Goldman. I'm not going to be covering the other people involved in this case necessarily. I really want to focus on him. And maybe somewhere down the line in a couple of years or something, if we're still sitting in this closet, I might go into those other aspects of the case. But right now, it's all about Ron. Before I begin, I do want to shout out a couple of the sources I used. The main one is a book called His Name is Ron, Our Search for Justice. It is by the family of Ron Goldman, along with William and Marilyn Hoffer, who helped make it a cohesive story.
Sure.
It's excellent. I'm going to link it. If you are interested in more about Ron's life and more about this case, I highly, highly, highly recommend it. It just gives a more developed picture of who he was and who his family is, and kind of what their side of things was as all of this was unfolding. So again, it's called His Name is Ron, and it'll be linked in our show notes. And then Ron's sister Kim did a podcast called Confronting O.J. Simpson that I will also be linking. It's a 10-part series, I believe, and I will link that in the notes as well, along with, of course, everything else that I used for this episode. And this is a 2-parter. I was going to try to get it into one, but there's a lot there, and I want to give a complete picture of him and a full story and not try to just like rush through. So we're going to do a two-parter here. And here we go. Ronald Lyle Goldman was not Nicole Brown Simpson's boyfriend. He was not her lover. He never dated her. Ron Goldman was not an aspiring actor or model, as the media claimed. He was, however, a lot of other things, like an excellent tennis player, a hopeless romantic, and a great dancer.
I love that. Tennis is amazing.
Do
you play? Have you ever played tennis? Do you play tennis?
Not really.
Okay.
I mean, I've played, but like I don't play.
I took a class in college.
Oh.
It was like an elective that I had to do for something for like a fitness course, and it was tennis and badminton. So the first couple months of the class, we learned tennis.
Okay.
I'm not good at it. I suck at it.
Yeah.
It's not good. Whatever.
I didn't mean to say yeah, like
No,
I assumed you wouldn't be good.
And if you did, Kate, totally fine. I would too. Badminton, however.
Really?
That's where it's at.
Oh, I've never heard of a school offering badminton as a course.
Well, mine did. Apologies. Continue. He was a good tennis player and a hopeless romantic.
And a great dancer. Ron loved to dance, and he was a people person. He could talk to anyone. He had a magnetism that friends said drew you to him. You wanted to be around Ron. You didn't necessarily know what you were going to be doing, but you knew it was going to be a good time. But he wasn't always the confident, cool guy his LA friends had come to know. Ron was born in Chicago.
I didn't know that.
I didn't either. On July 2nd, 1968. He was the firstborn child of his parents, Fred and Sharon. And 3 years later, his sister Kim was born. Ron and Kim were incredibly close.
Aww.
Like two peas in a pod. Their father, Fred, said from the day Kim was born, Ron looked at her like he had been waiting for her all his life, which is just the cutest freaking thing ever. Just a couple of years later, when Ron was about 5 or 6, Fred and Sharon divorced. Sharon had full custody of the kids, and Fred had full visitation rights.
I mean, if one parent gets custody, that's usually an indication that the other parent wasn't pulling their weight or there was something wrong.
Well, you have to remember this is the 70s. So typically custody went to the female.
Got it.
Regardless.
So like joint custody wasn't necessarily as like prevalent as it is today.
I don't think so. And as you hear more, you're going to realize that maybe the person who initially had custody didn't deserve it.
Okay. Got it.
Once the kids began living with just Sharon in her apartment, Ron started having trouble in school. He had previously done pretty well, but now he was struggling, and he was also acting up in class, which was unusual. His teacher was a bit concerned. Suddenly there's a shift in behavior, and she wanted to make sure that everything was okay. Mm-hmm. So when she told Fred, Ron's dad, about how he was doing in class, Fred decided perhaps the whole family should get into counseling.
It's a level-headed idea.
Yes. And especially for that time, I feel like, I mean, this was the 70s. Like, people aren't just like hopping into therapy willy-nilly.
They're like, that's like therapy at the time is an indication of like,
something's wrong with you.
You have something really wrong,
right.
And we need to look at you a different way.
Right. And for Fred Goldman, he was just doing what a father does. He was like, you know what? My kids are struggling.
Let's get some help.
They need to talk to somebody.
I like that.
Yeah.
Good for him.
He knew divorce was really hard on kids, so he's just trying to make the best of a tough situation.
Yes.
Sharon, however, was against the idea. She was like, I'm not going to counseling, but eventually she did agree to attend. And when they talked to the counselor, Ron and Kim quickly came out with the fact that Sharon basically ignored them at home.
Oh my God.
She just didn't pay much attention to them at all. Well, once the kids brought this up, Sharon refused to attend any more sessions. Like, you would think if a parent heard their child say, Mom, I feel like you ignore me. I don't feel like you want me around. You'd think, or you'd hope anyway, that parent would go, oh my God, honey, I'm so sorry. I never want you to feel that way. Like, I want to be able to give you all my attention. That'd be the reaction of a good, decent parent, I would think. But as we'll find out, Sharon was not a good or a decent parent.
Oh, shit.
When Fred heard these complaints from Ron and Kim, he offered to take over the day-to-day duties of raising the kids. He saw that Sharon was overwhelmed or just not interested in actually parenting her children. And he said, what if I take custody and you can have full visitation whenever you want? Essentially reversing their roles. And Sharon agreed. Basically, she was like, oh my God, yes, take these kids off my hands.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, that sucks. But at the same time, if something, can be done to help them in the situation,
exactly.
I think that is it.
So they signed an informal agreement to the arrangement. And since Fred didn't want the kids to have to change schools, he agreed to move into Sharon's apartment, and Sharon found another place.
Okay.
So you would think this would be the ideal situation. Sharon wouldn't have to handle all the responsibility of raising her children, but she could see them whenever she wanted. The problem was she rarely wanted to see them.
Yeah.
Even when they had set plans for her to come see the kids, she often failed to show. When Ron and Kim would call her on the phone, she rarely answered. And when they were able to get in touch with her, they'd be like, why didn't you show up today? I thought you were coming to see us. She always had some excuse. Sometimes it was, oh, sorry, I had to do my laundry. Like, these are your kids that you brought into the world, and you can't even stop by to say hello to them. Like, what?
That's so fucked up. It's just like, I wonder like how she felt when they were born. You know what I mean? Like, how was she towards them as like little kids? I mean, and I'm sure that's, not out there, but it doesn't, I mean, there's got to be some kind of descent into something.
You wonder, I mean, she had more than one.
I was going to say, like, is there like a post-traumatic, like, what's that thing It's PTSD, but there's
postpartum depression.
Thank you.
Oh my God. Wow.
Yes, thank you, Kate. Postpartum depression. I wonder if there's some, something larger going on back in that.
Yeah, I don't know, because if it was postpartum depression, let's just say she never got over it.
Sure.
On another occasion when she failed to show, her excuse was that she didn't have enough gas in her car to drive over there, and she didn't have enough money to fill the tank. But that same day, Ron and Kim saw their mom out driving through the neighborhood. She didn't stop by to say hi to them.
Oh, God, that must feel fucking awful.
Yeah.
I know how it feels. Like, my, dad was kind of absent after my parents divorced.
Mm-hmm.
And there were moments definitely where I wished he had come to, like, a special occasion.
Sure.
Or something like that. And just the resentment that you harbor after those instances is kind of a lifelong thing.
Especially when you're that young. I mean, that's gonna leave an impact.
A mark.
Yeah. This went on for about a year, this back and forth with Sharon making plans to see the kids and then finding an excuse not to show. And finally, Fred was fed up and he decided to turn their informal agreement into a formal one.
Good.
He called his attorney and had him file the necessary paperwork, granting him full legal custody of Ron and Kim.
Good. That was the smart move on his part, because people can go back on shit and, pull the bitch card.
That evening.
Oh, God.
When he got home from work, he walked through the door and said, hi, I'm home, like he did every day. He had a housekeeper who I think also acted as a babysitter because the kids were still really young.
Sure.
So he's expecting the housekeeper to say, oh, hello, and for his kids to come and greet him. But the house was silent. The housekeeper hadn't mentioned that she'd be taking the kids anywhere, so Fred was immediately concerned. He ran to their bedrooms, but they weren't there, and neither were their belongings. Their closets had been cleaned out. Their toys were gone. The place was empty. Fred immediately called Sharon. He's like, Sharon, the kids aren't here. What happened? Did you take them? And Sharon said, I don't know anything about it, and hung up the phone.
No.
The father of your children has just called you and told you your kids are missing, and you don't have any questions? You don't immediately say, oh my God, we need to call the police? So Fred knew Sharon had taken them.
She pulled some shit.
He learned later that while he had been at work, this is gonna send you. Sharon had gone over to the apartment and said to Ron and Kim, who remember are like 4 and 7.
Yeah.
Your daddy doesn't want you anymore, so you're coming with me.
Fuck you, Sharon.
Just imagine being a little kid and having your estranged mom come over and tell you that the man who has done everything for you, has been a great dad that you love so much, doesn't want you. So you have to move. You don't know if you're ever going to see him again.
That's disgusting. You don't do that. You don't try to poison your child against the other parent.
And the thing is, she didn't want the kid.
She didn't fucking want it to begin with.
She was just mad that Fred was filing for legal custody, and she wanted to hurt him.
Why? You know what I mean? Like, what is your fucking damage, Sharon?
It drives me insane because you hear about this a lot.
All the time.
And it's like, why? Why do you have to hurt
You don't want
innocent
them.
kids?
You're not providing for them. You're not treating them as a child should be treated.
So just fuck off.
So just fuck off.
Yeah.
Like, cut your losses and go be a piece of shit somewhere else.
So meanwhile, Fred is trying to figure out where the kids are.
Mm-hmm.
He called one of Sharon's sisters-in-law, Mary, who gave him the same response Sharon had, that she didn't know anything. Mm-hmm. So he called another sister-in-law who determined that Mary and Sharon were likely in on the kidnapping together.
Wait, who is Mary again?
Mary is a sister-in-law of Sharon.
Sister-in-law of Sharon. Oh, so Fred's sister.
I think it could have been Sharon's sibling's spouse.
Got you. I see.
I did the same thing. I was like, so why didn't they just say, I called my sister? No, I think it was Sharon's.
Longer.
Yeah.
Okay, I see.
Fred then called his attorney being like, what the fuck? And his attorney said, find out where they are, but don't do anything. So Fred drove to Mary's house, Sharon's sister-in-law, and sure enough, there's Ron and Kim in the front yard. It must have taken every ounce of restraint that he could possibly muster not to run up and grab those kids. But he did as his lawyer had instructed. This was on a Friday. The following Monday, they were in court. The judge was pissed.
Good.
When he heard what Sharon had done and ruled the children were to remain with Fred. Well, Fred and his then fiancée, Joan, went straight to Sharon's apartment. But when they showed up, the housekeeper held Ron and Kim back and wouldn't let them go. They are screaming, "Daddy, Daddy!" Ron managed to get free and ran towards his dad, who is standing with Joan in the doorway. But the housekeeper pulled Kim back and closed the door and locked it.
What the fuck?
This is like something you see on like some 10 o'clock news or something.
Yeah.
So Kim is trapped inside. Ron is outside with his dad. Joan takes Ron to the car so that Fred can go back and try to get Kim. But this housekeeper is screaming and threatening to call the police on Fred. And he was like, please do. I have a court order. These kids belong with me.
Belong to me.
At this point, Sharon's boyfriend, who happens to be a police officer, shows up. Sharon hasn't gotten there yet. I think it was a race from the courthouse to get to Sharon's place, and Fred got there first. I think that's what happened.
I see. Okay, so they were at Sharon's while they were in court. The kids were at Sharon's while they were at court. Yeah. I see.
So Sharon's boyfriend starts threatening Fred, saying he's going to throw him in jail. And Fred's like, you sure about that? Because I'm pretty sure you have to obey this court order. Meanwhile, Kim is curled up in the corner, sobbing. She's terrified.
Damn it.
Now Sharon shows up, the cause of this entire disaster. And she tells her boyfriend, you need to arrest him, get him out of here. But the boyfriend had just read the court order and was like, Sharon? No.
Well, thank God. I mean, what an ass for saying, I'm going to arrest you without knowing the full scope of the fucking story. But also, thank God he was like, oh, I just read this and I can't do anything.
The problem is Sharon poisoned a lot of people against Ron, Kim, and Fred, including the kids' maternal grandparents. So Fred, back to this situation. Fred runs in, picks Kim up, holds her the entire time as he's going through the apartment, packing up all their clothes and toys. From that point onward, Ron, Kim, and their dad, Fred, were like the three musketeers, as Kim puts it. They were incredibly close, and Ron and Kim developed a sort of it's us against them attitude, like it's us against the world.
This has nothing to do with anything, and I apologize, listeners and Kate, but there's a song from the late 90s by this little girl band called Play, and I used to be obsessed with it, and it was like, it's us against the world.
I thought you were going to say this is like in the movie The Holiday when Cameron Diaz talks about how she was the Three Musketeers with her and her dad and her sibling, and then Jude Law's kids are the Three Musketeers with him, but that's not what you said.
Well, that was my second.
Okay, that's what I thought.
So we're on the same wavelength.
Yeah, here we
got it.
Fred never said a bad thing about Sharon to his kids. He felt that if they wanted to try and have a relationship with her, it was their decision, and he didn't want to influence their opinion of her in any particular way. So unlike Sharon, who's like bad-mouthing them all over the place, Fred never did that. But one day, Ron and Kim went to their dad and said, "Is it okay if we don't call Mom anymore? She's not a mom." And he said, "Sure, what do you want to call her?" And
Bitch.
They were like 4 and 7.
Sure. Which?
And at the same time, they both said Sharon.
Oh, okay. Sure.
Just her names.
Yeah, that's fine. Sorry.
You can relax over there.
It's okay, Sharon.
And like as I was mentioning just a minute ago, Sharon had even convinced her parents, the kids' grandparents, that it was Ron and Kim that didn't want anything to do with her. Not the case. And the grandparents disowned them. Wanted nothing to do with their own grandchildren.
These, my dear, these are children.
Yep.
These are children. Mm-hmm. If this whole side of this family is tainted. There's something going on in this family mentally and emotionally that is creating this hellscape for these kids, and I'm glad that they were able to disconnect.
When you see the amazing people that Ron and Kim grew into, it's such a testament to Fred.
Good. Because
wow, the amazing job he did with him on his own, essentially. I mean, he did eventually remarry, but like he was dealing with a lot with his ex. Ron was very protective of his little sister. I don't think I've ever read about another sibling bond that was as strong as this one. They walked to school together, and then eventually when they started taking the bus, Ron always chose to sit with Kim. Kim constantly followed her big brother Ron around and his friends, wanting to play wiffle ball or frisbee or whatever they happened to be playing, and Ron didn't mind. In fact, he would make sure whatever he and his friends were doing was something that Kim could participate in as well.
Nice.
I feel like usually it's the older sibling being like, "Leave me alone, you're too young," or "You're a girl, we don't want a girl on the team," or whatever, you know? But it just goes to show how tight the bond was between the two of them because Ron always included her. Kim also had to help Ron pick out his clothes because he was colorblind. So he would put together outfits that did not go. And he'd like walk into the room and Kim be like, no. She'd take one look at him and be like, go back upstairs. She'd tell him, this shirt goes with these pants. Don't ever wear this sweater with those pants. Like, she's just looking out for him, you know?
When you were a kid, did you have like a favorite outfit that you would wear like all the time, every single time you could? Mine was a pair of, they were long black, like sweatpant style, but it's that really thin material of sweatpant.
Okay.
And an emerald green turtleneck.
Oh, I didn't expect it to go there.
Oh, well, neither did everyone else.
I was really into neon.
Oh, of course you were.
So there was a lot of neon in my life. Side ponytails, neon green shorts.
Do you have pictures of this, Kate?
Oh, do I have pictures?
I also used to wear bike shorts, like the tight bike shorts with like a baggy tee.
Oh, yeah, that's a good look.
Kate and I are going to dress up as our child selves.
Yeah, we should.
I would like that. Apologies continue.
No need to apologize. As Ron and Kim got older and each one started dating, they would approve or disapprove of whoever the other one liked. They were truly the best of friends.
No.
They would also give a thumbs up or a thumbs down of who their dad dated.
I wish I would have been able to do that with my dad. Thumbs up or thumbs down. Like, we didn't have that much of a close relationship, but there were some weirdos in there.
Okay.
I get it.
In 1978, Fred married Joan, who I mentioned earlier. But at that point in time, Ron, Kim, and Fred were so tight that, as Fred described it, it was hard for Joan to break in. She was the outsider, and after a few years, they decided to divorce. Ron and Kim were teenagers when Fred brought home Patty Glass for them to meet. They instantly liked her. Patty had 3 kids of her own, Brian, Michael, and Lauren, and Ron and Kim were still the oldest. And at first, the kids didn't really hang out. It was just kind of like, yeah, our parents are dating, so what? And Patty and Fred weren't living together, so each family had their own lives. But then Patty's dad had a heart attack while on a flight, and the flight made an emergency landing in Michigan. Patty, of course, wanted to go be with him, and Fred wanted to go with her to support, so they traveled to Michigan while Kim and Ron stayed home alone. They were old enough that they didn't need a babysitter, but Patty got a babysitter for her kids.
Well, that's nice. She didn't try to stick her kids with.
Yeah, she wasn't like, well, since you guys are here. No, she got a babysitter for her kids. While Fred and Patty were away, however, Lauren, who is the youngest, I'm not sure her exact age at this time, but she was definitely under 10. She felt like the babysitter was mean to her, and she wanted to call her mom. But instead, Brian and Michael, her older brothers, called Ron and Kim and told them what happened. This was winter in Chicagoland. It was cold. It was snowing. But without hesitation, Ron and Kim went over to Patty's, fired the babysitter, and brought the 3 kids back to the Goldman house. The kids invited friends over and had a huge snowball fight in the front yard. They stayed up late and hung out, had a little slumber party, basically. So they started to bond.
That babysitter took a page out of Sharon's book, it sounds like.
Uh-oh. It also goes to show you how Ron really embraced the role of big brother and protector, which continues throughout his life. At one point, while they were dating, Fred and Patty took the kids on a vacation to Florida. And while they were there, Fred, Patty, Ron, and Kim were driving down the road when a drunk driver coming from the opposite direction lost control of his vehicle and ended up running through several small trees on the median. The impact of that caused the drunk driver's car battery to go flying through the air and crash through the windshield of the car with Patty and the Goldmans.
Oh my God.
Acid shot out of the battery. It missed Fred and Ron. Patty got slightly burned, but Kim was badly burned. I think she almost died. Like, it was very serious.
That is, okay, I'm sorry. Car accidents are awful in general, but this is like such a weird thing. Do you know what I mean? Like how?
Yeah, I've never
like,
heard
boom,
of the car
a battery
flying.
flies out and you get sprayed with battery acid.
Wild.
I didn't even know. Like I know it's battery acid, but I didn't know that it's like that corrosive
you
to
don't
humans.
think about it.
Oh,
Because how often does a battery go flying out of a car and hit a windshield?
New fear unlocked.
Uh-oh.
Keep
Sorry.
those hoods closed.
Yikes. Ron pulled Kim out of the wreckage and did not leave her side. While she was in the hospital, he stayed with her, catered to her, kept reassuring her she was still beautiful because she's badly burned.
On the face, like
her face and eyes. She lost her vision for a time, and her face looked, as she described it, like a barbecue. She went through years of surgeries, multiple surgeries. But Ron was there to support. As a teenager, Ron was a skinny, kind of a dorky kid. He wore braces at one point and had to wear headgear. He was not a fan. He also had a cowlick at the front of his hair, so in an effort to hide it, he got a perm. That was a mistake.
That's not. Don't go further into the cowlick, everybody.
Fight against it. You don't have
Come
to.
out of it. Don't go into it further.
He walked into school freshman year with this bad perm, and the other students just felt bad for him. Kim felt bad for him. Everyone just felt bad for him.
Oh my God.
But despite being a little awkward, he was really popular. He wasn't part of the in crowd, but he had a good group of friends. He was laid back, total goofball, really easy to talk to. However, he was more interested in being the class clown than he was in getting good grades, which was a point of contention between him and his dad. Fred wanted Ron to focus more, and Ron just wanted to have fun. In 1986, Ron enrolled at Illinois State University. While packing up to move into the dorm, Kim and Patty sewed numerically coded labels into his clothes so that he could match his outfits because of being colorblind.
Sweet.
I was mentioning this to Matt because Matt's colorblind.
I think I knew that. I just forget.
Yeah. And so I was like, oh, yeah, Kim had to tell him how to dress. He goes, oh, yeah, that happened to me. I didn't know how to put clothes together because he couldn't tell what colors they were.
How does he do it today? Do you tell him?
Well, look at his clothes. They're all gray. Look at that.
Oh my God.
He's got 17 gray sweaters.
It's making sense. A neutral palette. You say that and I get it now. Oh my God.
Yeah.
We're sitting by all
Blues
of
and grays.
Blues, grays, and theys. Anyway, go ahead.
Ron didn't know yet what he wanted to do in life, so he didn't have much focus in college. The way Fred put it, he said Ron majored in fraternity.
Yeah.
He partied, he was charming, he wasn't a big drinker, he didn't smoke, he didn't do drugs, but he knew how to have a good time. And as a result, his classwork suffered and he dropped out after just one semester.
Out of college.
Yes.
It's not for everyone.
It's not. We say this all the time. Fred was disappointed, to say the least.
Well, it's back in that time where parents are like, college, you got to go to college.
It's that thing of like, okay, well, after you graduate high school, like, that's what you do. Then you go to college. Yeah. Like, there's no question about it.
And if you don't, you're somehow lesser.
However, the timing of Ron leaving college worked out pretty well because a couple of months later, in February of 1987, Fred and Patty married. And just 3 days after the wedding, the entire family moved out to California because Fred had gotten a new job. Shortly after settling into their new home in Agoura, just outside of LA, the whole family went to see a counselor to help them through the transition, not just of moving, but also of joining the two families together. You really got to hand it to Fred. He's doing everything right in terms of making the kids a priority, making sure everyone in the family feels heard. Fred's a real one. At first, the kids struggled with sharing the attention of their new parents and new siblings. Patty's kids suddenly had to share their mom with Ron and Kim. Kim had to share her brother with Brian, Michael, and Lauren. It was definitely a big change. But Ron thrived in LA. Their home was about 20 miles from the ocean, and Ron loved it. He changed his diet. He started eating a lot healthier. He got a tan, grew his hair out a little longer, maybe hiding that cowlick a little bit, started working out at a gym, like looking real good.
The LA style.
He was definitely, like, he embraced that whole California boy.
Cali culture.
Ooh. He was 18 and hit a big growth spurt. He got taller. His body filled out. He was more muscular. His physical appearance changed dramatically. He was no longer the skinny, dorky kid. His siblings, however, struggled with the move because they all had to adjust to going to a new school. On Lauren's first day, she was really scared. Remember, she's the youngest. She's in a new place, meeting new people. It was a lot. She was sitting in class and she opens up her brand new notebook, and on the front page was a note that read, "Have a good day. You'll do great. Love, Ron." Ron was a great older brother to Lauren. At her bat mitzvah a few years later, they had a blast together. He danced with her. He sang. He and his dad, Fred, along with Michael and Brian, got up on stage, and Fred and Ron had inflatable guitars, and they all sang old-time rock and roll. Ron was always up for a good time. And there's footage of this bat mitzvah. And at one point in the evening, Ron gets on the video to record a message for Lauren, and he says, quote, "Okay, obviously, this is your older brother. We don't get to spend very much time together, so I'm very glad that I was able to be here and spend this time with you because God knows where I'll be in a year." Chillingly, Ron would be dead less than a year after recording that message.
What?
We'll get there. Just put a pin there. Kim was starting her new high school during her second semester of her freshman year because remember, they moved right after the wedding in February. So she's just started high school. She's a freshman and she's going in the middle of that. So lots of newness, lots of inopportune times to be starting a new school.
Yes. Can I ask a question? I don't mean it to be rude or anything. I just, from that accident with the car battery, did that leave Kim disfigured in any way?
She's gorgeous. So I know she had multiple surgeries.
I was just curious, like, if after, like you said, how bad it was.
As far as I can tell, she made a full recovery. Like, she got her vision back.
Great.
You would not know that anything happened.
Okay. Not that that's important, if anybody.
No, that's a great question.
But I just curious, like.
Because I did just kind of throw it out there and leave it. So, yeah.
I was like, okay, is she
okay? Yes. No, from what I can tell, full recovery.
Wonderful.
So Kim is entering into her freshman year, second semester. Her school is really small. And of course, everyone there already knew each other. So Kim felt like the outcast. But Ron drove her to school every single morning, top down, blasting music, and the girls at her school looked at him like, "Ooh, who's the cute new guy in town?" So Kim's popularity got a major boost because all the girls were like, "Ooh, that's your brother?"
That?
Yeah. Brian would have been in middle school at the time of the move. I didn't find anything specific about troubles he had with the transition, but his younger brother, Michael, he was young and he was trying to figure it all out. And Ron knew Michael looked up to him as the oldest, so once a week, he would invite Michael out on a walk just to give him a chance to talk about anything on his mind. Like, just the thought of that, I mean, Ron's 18, 19 at this point. To even like notice that in a younger sibling and be like, oh, you know what? He could use an outlet, and he could use, maybe someone else to talk to that's not his parent, to invite him for a weekly walk. And of course, when you're younger and your oldest sibling is like taking you out and you're going to the shops and you're going to get pizza, like, it makes you feel special. It makes you feel important.
My childhood friend Adriana's dad took us to a biker bar once when we were kids.
That's a choice.
And I got scared.
I would imagine.
So the bikers were real nice to me. And they took me to a payphone and I called my mom and they came and picked me up. I feel bad for that girl because we were down playing by the river. There was a river behind the bar with a dock. And Adriana's dad was like, don't let her drown. And then just like went into the bar.
That feels like something that should be investigated.
I don't know why I brought this up. I just wanted to put that out there. I understand the feelings. Let's continue.
Okay. So Ron and Michael would walk to the grocery store to go get a bite to eat. Their favorite place to go was a donut shop called the Donut Inn.
Ugh, donuts.
Just as he was with all his other siblings, Ron was a great older brother to Michael. When Michael entered high school, he joined the tennis team and found his school was looking for a new coach. Ron was a great tennis player, so Michael mentioned the job to him, and Ron was like, that sounds right up my alley. So he interviewed, and he was hired. Michael loved having Ron as his school's tennis coach. Ron was a great player, for one, and the students looked up to him. So I think that earned Michael some cool points among his peers. Similar to Kim, I think people were like, ooh, that's your brother. Michael was so proud to have Ron coaching his team.
Everybody wants to be around the hot guy.
He was hot. Ron was always there with a pep talk or some life advice. He told Michael, you've got to walk with confidence to make people look at you with confidence. And he told him, you know how to deal with people, and that's going to take you far in life.
I need to hear this advice. Walk with confidence so people know you have confidence. Is that what he was saying?
He said, this is the quote. You've got to walk with confidence to make people look at you with confidence.
Got it. Okay. I'm going to practice this after I leave here tonight, Kate.
Good.
I'm going to go to Mariano's and I'm going to walk with confidence. Do you have a pair of heels I could borrow?
I absolutely do.
Wonderful.
And he also said, don't make the same mistakes I made. Finish college. Ron did enroll in Pierce Junior College in LA for a bit, but his grades weren't great, and school just wasn't for him.
Everybody.
Yeah. However, it was while at college one day that he happened to notice a flyer for a camp looking to hire counselors. The campers were all kids who were minorities, inner city youth who had some tough situations going on at home. And even though Ron already had a job, he was working at a tanning salon at the time. He decided to take on the second job of camp counselor. Similar to the coaching position, he thought, yeah, this job seems like it was made for me.
Yeah.
He was great with kids, loved helping people. He really sparked to this, and he was great at it. The woman that ran the camp said that the kids all looked up to Ron. He was their role model. He was always there to offer advice and give encouragement, just like he did with his own siblings. Eventually, he took another job at a residence home for patients with cerebral palsy. Many of the patients there were in wheelchairs and couldn't do basic tasks without assistance, so it was Ron's job to help them bathe and get dressed and even help them to eat. Ron treated them all with respect. He saw them as capable human beings who just needed some help with things. Patients loved him. He would crank up the music over the PA system and dance with the patients by twirling them around in their wheelchairs.
That's amazing.
They had a blast. The facilities director said she'd never seen the patients smile as much as they did when Ron danced with them. But he still wasn't sure what career path he wanted to take. He bounced around from job to job for a bit, but then began waiting tables. And he realized he loved waiting tables.
That's nice.
He got to interact with customers and constantly meet new people. And that was like his sweet spot. His dad, Fred, wasn't thrilled about him being a waiter. He wanted Ron to aspire to something that Fred deemed more, quote, substantial, probably more lucrative, perhaps.
Right.
But even Fred had to admit that Ron was really good at waiting tables. He and Patty went to a restaurant Ron was working at for dinner one night, and Fred saw that his son excelled at his job. And the manager even came over and told them, oh yeah, customers often request to sit in Ron's section. Ron worked at several different restaurants over the years, and it was while he was working at the Cheesecake Factory. I fucking loved the Cheesecake Factory.
I have only been a handful of times, and I want to go.
When I lived in LA, I fucking loved the Cheesecake. I mean, I realized Cheesecake Factories are like everywhere.
Oh, 100% a chain. Love a chain restaurant.
But there was one that I always went to in LA because they had this one dish that had like, it was pasta, but then they had roasted garlic. Like, I'm talking probably 3 heads worth of cloves of roasted garlic. That shit was delicious. And then I went one day and it wasn't on the menu.
No.
And I was like, excuse me, what happened to the roasted garlic chicken pasta dish? And they were like, oh yeah, we don't do that anymore. I never went back.
You've never been back since?
Never been back.
That happened to me at Olive Garden. One day, you will go in, and all of a sudden, the chocolate lasagna is off the dessert menu.
Why the fuck would they get rid of something called chocolate lasagna?
Did you ever have that?
No. And I guess I never will.
And you never will. And it was layers of like chocolate and buttercream.
Oh my goodness.
With like chocolate chips on top.
That sounds amazing. Kevin's having a moment. He's in tears over here. So like I was saying, it was while he was working at the Cheesecake Factory that Ron ended up with a modeling gig. A clothing store next to the restaurant was planning to run an ad in the Cheesecake Factory menu. That's how big Cheesecake Factory menus
Cheesecake
were.
Factory
People
runs
were
menu.
buying ads.
Buying ads in the menu. I wonder if they still do that.
I've never seen it.
I want to buy a personals ad in the Cheesecake Factory menu.
So you like Cheesecake Factory.
So you like Cheesecake Factory? You're going to like me.
Exactly. The man that ran the clothing store saw Ron waiting tables and was like, hey, you want to model for this ad and you can have some free clothes? And Ron was like, sure, I'll take some free clothes. So that was his big venture into modeling. Then one of his friends dared him to audition for the show Studs, which was kind of like the dating game, but sleazier. And after his audition, the talent coordinator for the show wrote a note next to his picture that said, girls will love him.
He's jumping around the hot jobs. Like, that's what I'm just thinking about. Like, of course, he's like a hot camp counselor.
He was a charmer.
And then, goes into the Cheesecake Factory and then is a model. I love this. I love this trajectory.
You love this journey for him.
Yeah.
Ron was selected to be on the show, which paid for Ron to go on 3 dates with 3 different women. But Ron didn't feel like the amount the show gave was sufficient, so he used his own money to make sure the women had a good date.
Of course he did, because he's a good person.
Exactly. When it was scheduled to air, he called his sister Kim and was like, you're not going to believe what I did. So she threw a viewing party for her and her friends. And when they watched, she said she was so embarrassed. She was like, what is my brother doing? Because he was acting all cocky and his hair was slicked back. Ugh. And he had this huge ego. And his dad was like, where did that ego come from? Like, what is going on? Everyone in his family was like, who is this guy? But to Ron, it was all fun and games. Like, he was just having fun with it. He wasn't a playboy. In reality, he was a huge romantic. He liked to cook dinners and send flowers and write notes to the women he dated. And he desperately wanted to settle down and have a family. He craved stability, especially because his childhood had been so unstable. And he knew he wanted kids. He even had a name picked out for his firstborn, Dakota. But the women he met weren't looking to settle down right away. They were young, early 20s. So not surprisingly, none of his relationships really panned out. I think women were scared away a bit. Imagine being 20 and the guy you're out with already has his kid's name picked out. Like, that can be a lot for anyone, even more so.
So he was scaring people.
When you're that young. I feel like, not intentionally, but
No, but I'm just saying, like, when you go on a first date or a second date with somebody and they're bringing up, like, marriage and kids, and you're like,
it's a lot.
Whoa,
you're like,
whoa,
let's slow it down.
Bring it back.
Yeah.
What's your name?
But he knew what he wanted, and that was the thing, like, the women he was dating, they just weren't there yet.
Right. Nothing against them, nothing against him. I understand.
When Ron was 24, 25, he did date a woman named Jackie for about a year and a half, but I think it was kind of off and on. And ultimately, I think he was looking for something more serious than what she was looking for. But their breakup was amicable and they stayed friends. And that is something that I read about a lot. Like all the women he dated, he was still friends with afterward. Like there was no animosity. They all had nothing but nice things to say about him.
That's nice. I wish I could say that. I was just thinking, because, like, I've definitely done that before, like, dated somebody, and then, like, 3 weeks into it was like, I really like you a lot.
Oh.
And they were like, oh.
Yikes.
And I was like, did I say something wrong?
They were like, yeah, you expressed your feelings.
Right.
There was another girl, Lauren, not to be confused with his stepsister, who Ron fell pretty hard for. Lauren was still in college, and she was dating someone. And I'm not sure how she and Ron met, but from the moment they did, there was an instant connection. They never dated, but they became best friends. They spent a lot of time together. Ron would invite her over to have dinner with his family. He was crazy about her. And so was Ron's family. They all really liked her. Ron invited Lauren to spend Passover with his family, and at one point, she excused herself to go use the restroom, and when she left, Kim said, Ron, do not fuck this up. And he was like, you don't have to tell me, talk to her. She's the one with a boyfriend. She knows how I feel about her. Ron would call Lauren every morning before she went to class and say, good morning, sunshine. And if she had a test or something, he'd call that morning and be like, get up, don't be late, you have a test, you're always late. Like he was always looking out for her. Lauren told Kim years later that she always thought she and Ron would end up together, but that she knew she had a lot of growing up to do first. So while they never dated, they did hang out a lot. Lauren was a huge hockey fan, so they'd watch hockey together. They went to dance clubs. They'd go check out new bands. They hung out at the Viper Room. And it was one night at the Viper Room that Ron said, we should get tattoos. And Lauren was like, oh my God, yes, I've always wanted one, and I know exactly what I want to get. Lauren wanted to get a tattoo of the Eye of Horus, which is an Egyptian symbol that represents healing and protection. And Ron said, great, I'll get the same thing. And she was like, no, like we're already getting tattoos together. We're not going to get the same one. So Ron said, okay, well, what would go well with the Eye of Horus? And she said, the Ankh. And she told him the Ankh was an Egyptian symbol for the key to life, that it represented eternal life. And he said, okay, I'll get that. Lauren's parents and Ron's dad, Fred, were not happy that their kids had gotten tattoos. When Ron showed his to his family, he was like, look what Lauren designed for me. And she was like, oh, great, they're going to hate me now.
Ron would have totally done those like vending machine tattoo things. Have you ever seen that? Like it's you go to a tattoo shop and you can put a quarter in the machine and turn it and it pops out one of those little plastic balls with the cap on the bottom.
Oh.
And you open it up and there's a little design in there and whatever you get,
that's what you're
getting in a tattoo.
I don't know if he would. I mean, maybe he would have done that, but I think he liked the thought of him having a similar tattoo to Lauren. It was like a connection with her. Ron and Lauren remained the best of friends, and he was still also really close with his best friend from back in Illinois, Mike Pincus. Ron and Mike met when they were in kindergarten and had always been inseparable. After living in California for a couple of years, once Ron was ready to move out of his family's home, he called Mike up in Illinois and said, get your butt out here and live with me. Mike's initial reaction was, I can't just up and move. But all it took was a little convincing from Ron, and Mike soon found himself a California resident. Ron even introduced him to the woman that would eventually become Mike's wife. Meanwhile, Ron was still looking for the one. At one point, he started seeing a woman who, according to his dad, had expensive tastes. And Ron wasn't making enough money waiting tables to give her everything he wanted to be able to give her. So he took a corporate job, which meant he needed a nice wardrobe. So now he's spending money on clothes. The bills kept adding up, and he was in over his head. By the time he was about 23, he was $12,000 in debt. And his dad was like, you've got to figure this out on your own. I'm not going to bail you out. You got yourself into this mess. You've got to get yourself out of it. So Ron went to a finance counselor. He consolidated his debt, and he really tried to get back on track, but eventually he had to file for bankruptcy. There was definitely tension between he and his dad. He wanted to prove to his dad that he could be a success, despite not finishing college. He did different jobs to make ends meet, including working as a promoter for nightclubs at one point, which I think he was probably pretty good at because it's all about meeting people, charming people. It came naturally to him. But he was always drawn back to waiting tables, eventually landing a job as a server at Mezzaluna, an Italian restaurant in the Brentwood neighborhood of Los Angeles. Ron was living in an apartment in Brentwood at the time, and the restaurant was just a short walk from his place. Brentwood is a really nice area. It's frequented by celebrities. It's the kind of neighborhood where you never know who you might run into. And it was while on a coffee run at the Starbucks on San Vicente Boulevard, just a block or so from Ron's place, that his friends, Mike Davis and Jeff Keller, which we'll talk more about them in part 2, introduced him to Nicole Brown Simpson. Mike and Jeff were waiters as well and trying to make it as actors, and Nicole actually knew them already because they often ran into her at Starbucks, and Ron even thought she was maybe interested in one of them. I don't think she was, but they just talked pretty easily together and that kind of thing. Nicole, like Ron, made friends easily and was easy to talk to, and she too had waited tables, so she connected with these guys. Ron and Nicole began running into each other more and more. If they saw each other at Starbucks, they'd chat for a while. They also realized they both went to the same gym, so they'd run into each other there, and she lived just a couple of blocks from Ron. According to Lauren, the woman Ron was really close to and spent a lot of time with, she and Ron would occasionally run into Nicole out at dance clubs. But they weren't friends in the sense that they weren't calling each other up and making plans and hanging out. They were acquaintances. But it was their shared interest of going out to dance clubs that led to one night Nicole allowing Ron to drive her in her Ferrari to the Gate, which was a hot Hollywood nightclub. So, of course, when he rolls up in this white Ferrari with Nicole Brown Simpson, people were like, oh my God, who's that guy? Ron ate it up. He got a kick out of it. He even asked her if he could borrow her car to go meet his friend for lunch one day, and she was like, yeah, sure. Like, she didn't care. But again, they were little more than acquaintances. They happened to live in the same neighborhood and frequent the same places, and they were friendly toward one another. Nicole often dined at Mezzaluna, where Ron worked, because she had dated the director of operations at the restaurant, Keith Zlomsowicz. I probably butchered that. And even after she and Keith stopped seeing each other, they remained close friends. So Ron would see her at the restaurant. Often, when there was food left at Mezzaluna that they didn't sell, Ron would take it and bring it to his neighbors. Gail Everts, who lived nearby, had befriended Ron while he was living in Brentwood, and he would take her pasta from the restaurant, and they'd chat about life. He'd tell her about his relationships. And she asked him once if he was dating Nicole Brown Simpson, because I think she'd seen them talking at Starbucks or maybe at the restaurant or something, and he said, absolutely not. Think about how often you see the same people from your own neighborhood. Over and over, you see them out on a walk or at the grocery. It doesn't mean that you're dating or that there is like any major relationship there.
Actually, Kate, I'm dating that old couple that lives in my apartment building that we both run into.
I love them. So I just want to make that clear because
sure, I'm sorry. Yes,
the media really focuses on their relationship, but there just wasn't much of one there, to be completely honest. One night after work, Ron stopped by his neighbor Gail's place and he noticed her window was open. So he threw a tennis ball inside to let her know he was there. And she comes to the door. Well, he plays tennis, so he's got tennis balls readily available.
Well, I mean, he just threw it through a window.
I mean, lightly. I don't think he was like chucking it like a
Could you imagine you hear like, ow!
I think he was cautious. So she comes to the door, she lets him in. And he was basically like, hey, here's some bread and pasta and lock your freaking windows. Jumping into that protective role, as usual, he was just like, anyone could just climb through your window. Like, what are you doing? During his time waiting tables, like, he's doing his thing, he's making some money, getting by, but he was looking towards the future. He began forming an idea for a business. He wanted to open his own restaurant. Instead of a name, it was just going to have the symbol of the Ankh, and he had drawn out designs for the building. The entire building was going to be in the shape of the Ankh. Like, he really embraced that
Ankh
symbol. Yes. And he really, I think, just kind of sparked to that whole idea of, like, eternal
What
life.
does an Ankh look like?
You've seen, okay, I'm going to draw it in the air for you.
Okay. I love this.
Like, it looks kind of like a key.
Yes.
Yes.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
For those that don't have X-ray vision through your headphones.
Too bad, so sad.
To help him further his business idea along, he connected with people who were helping him put his business plan together and get some of the gears turning. But he didn't want to tell his dad about it until the plan was fully formed and he had everything in place. So instead, he confided in his sister, Kim. Kim was always his confidant. So even if he was nervous about his dad finding something out that he had done, he was quick to tell Kim about it. Like the time he went to jail.
Oh, here we are.
He'd gotten pulled over for speeding. It was not his first speeding ticket by any means.
Uh-oh.
But this time he was driving a friend's Jeep. So when he was pulled over and the officer discovered he had a number of outstanding tickets and this wasn't even his car, the officer put him in jail. Ron was nervous to call his dad, so he called Kim, who was in school in Santa Barbara at the time, but she drove down to LA and loaned him the money. And although Ron thanked her at the time, he never paid her back. This ate away at Kim. And the more she thought about it, the angrier she got. Wow. But she was bad at confrontation, so she didn't bring it up.
She let it stew.
She did. So it only got like bigger and bigger and bigger. To the point where she finally wrote him a letter, letting her feelings out, saying that she felt that he took her for granted, all this stuff. But Ron was really bothered by this because he didn't see it that way. And he was like, I love you. You're my sister. You're my best friend. It took a while for Kim, but she realized the anger she was expressing towards Ron was really what she was feeling towards Sharon. We are not done with Sharon. She's going to come back with a vengeance in part 2.
I'm going to need you to put some kind of like thunderstorm effect every time we say her name.
We should have sound.
Sharon.
Wow, that was the...
I don't know how to make a thunderstorm.
I don't either.
Noise.
Ron was working hard to make some money, get himself in a better position financially. Mezzaluna was a means to an end. More than anything, he wanted to be successful and have a family. On Friday, June 10th, 1994, Ron was on his second date with a woman named Tiffany Starr. That night at dinner, he told her he wanted to be married within the next 2 years and have a kid, and he was hoping for a son. Kind of a heavy topic for a second date.
Was Tiffany okay with that, or was she just like, no?
I don't think she was like, no. I think, they're still in that getting to know you phase. I don't think she thought, it's not like they were far enough in for her to be like, oh, I don't want to be around this guy, you know?
Okay.
It was like, oh, okay, this guy knows what he wants.
Okay.
After their date, she had to go to work. She was a cocktail waitress. So Ron went out to a club. But he left kind of early, said he wasn't having any fun. He didn't love the nightclub life. He would have preferred to stay in with a girl and have a quiet evening together at home. But the clubs were a chance for him to see people, get out and socialize. On Saturday, he and his friend Jeff went to the beach and played volleyball. And that evening, he went out to another club with a couple of female friends. The next day, Sunday, June 12th, Ron went over to a park near his apartment where he played softball with some friends. The picture that I'm posting for this episode is from that day. It was taken while he was at the park. He's got on a white t-shirt, baseball cap that he's wearing backwards, full like 1994 style, and he's holding a bat, and he has the biggest smile on his face. After the softball game, Ron had a shift at Mezzaluna. He went home to get ready, put on his uniform of black pants, a white button-up shirt, and a tie, and he walked over to the restaurant. Nicole was dining there with her family that night. They had all just attended her daughter Sydney's dance recital. Ron saw them there, but he wasn't their waiter. He was still working his shift when they left, and shortly afterward, the restaurant received a call from Nicole. Her mom, Juditha, had accidentally left her glasses behind. The person who took the call, I want to say it was the shift manager, told Nicole they'd put the glasses in an envelope and set them aside so she could pick them up the next day.
Okay.
Ron overheard this and was like, oh, I'll just take them to her. But the manager said, oh, you don't have to do that. She can just swing by and get them. But Ron insisted, there's no point in having her come back. She lives right by me. I'll just run them over to her on my way out with Stuart tonight. Stuart Tanner was the bartender at Mezzaluna, and he and Ron had made plans to hang out after work. Ron clocked out at 9:33 p.m., undid his tie, and sat at the bar where he drank a bottle of water and chatted with Stuart. He told Stuart he was going to go home and change clothes, drop off the glasses, and then meet up with him. And as he left the restaurant, he turned back toward his friend and said, "I'll see you later." But Stuart never saw his friend again. When Ron got back to his apartment at 11663 Gorham, Unit 3, he flung his waiter uniform over his bedroom door and changed into more comfortable clothes. He called his friend Lauren, and they talked about watching a hockey game later. Then he grabbed the envelope that contained Juditha Brown's glasses and left, leaving a glass of water and a half-eaten Mrs. Fields cookie on the coffee table. He walked the short distance to Nicole's residence at 875 South Bundy Drive. But as he approached the entrance, he discovered someone else had arrived just moments before him. And that's where we're going to end part 1. You can leave your comments on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube at
Horrorwood Podcast.
Or shoot us an email at
horrorwoodpodcast@gmail.com.
Or you can be like Yoli and join our Patreon over at
patreon.com/horrorwoodpodcast.
And we'll be back in a few days with part 2.